Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be going over removal effects, and in particular Scorch and Epidemic. We've gone over damaging effects and how if damage reduces a unit to 0 strength it'll go to the graveyard, but there are other effects in Gwent that actually remove cards directly without actually dealing damage to them, and those effects can kill units of any strength value regardless of whether they're shielded or not, depending on whether they meet whatever removal criteria the card says. So as an example, I have this card here, Epidemic, in my hand. It says destroy all the lowest units. What that means is that when I play this card, whatever unit or units, if there's a tie, on the entire board, which includes my side and the opponent's side, will be removed. In this case, you can see the opponent has 2 units at 5 strength here. That's the weakest unit on the entire board. So in the current board state, if I play Epidemic, it will kill Roach and Foltus on the opponent's side, and I don't have any 5 strength units, so I'll be fine. So this is a pretty good time for me to play this card. So you'll see both of them kind of get immediately destroyed and removed to the graveyard. If either of those units had had shields on them, they still would have been removed. Shields does not protect against direct removal, it only protects against damage. Now you'll notice this silver card I have in my hand here, Scorch. This is very similar to Epidemic, except that instead of hitting all the lowest units on the board, it hits the highest units. So in this case, in the current board state, the opponent's Regis Higher Vampire is the strongest unit on the board at 15. So if I were to play Scorch right now, it would remove Regis. If I happen to have a unit bigger than that on my side, it would actually destroy the unit on my side instead of the opponent's unit. So an important thing to keep in mind is that when you're using cards like this, you can end up destroying units on your own side. And it's a pretty common thing for new players to, at least once in their Gwent careers, accidentally scorch some units on their own side, which usually is going to cause you to lose a round, or probably the match. So we'll try out Scorch here. It kills his 15 strength unit immediately, it goes to the graveyard. My Scorch goes back to the graveyard. Now, I happen to be playing Ethne, and her special ability is resurrecting a spell from the graveyard. So in this situation, the next strongest unit on the board is actually Triss. You'll see Triss here at 11. So if I were to use Ethne and resurrect my Scorch, I can actually remove another unit by doing that. These particular examples were pretty good value for Scorch, but one of the most powerful things you can do with Scorch is try to get a bunch of units on the enemy's side lined up at the same strength level. So when I first started the video and played Epidemic, you'll notice I was able to remove 2 units at the same time with that card, because they happen to both be at 5. So in this situation, if I could play Scorch again, I would actually be able to remove both of these reinforced ballistas, because they're the biggest units on the board, and they're both tied at 8 here. So a thing you usually try to do when you're playing a card like Scorch is maybe use damaging effects to try to line up units on the opponent's side so that they have the same strength value, and so that they're also the biggest units on the whole board. And then you use your Scorch, and sometimes you can get really big ones that will maybe remove 3 or 4 units at the same time and maybe swing 30 plus points in your favor. That's not a super common thing, but it can happen, and when you do it, it is really fun and usually can single-handedly either win you a round or sometimes win you a match. That's most of what there is to say about normal Scorch and Epidemic. I will say there are certain cards in the game that are units that come with certain Scorch-like effects. You'll notice this card in my hand, Geralt Igni. He says, destroy all the highest units on the opposite row if that row totals 25 or more power. So Geralt Igni is kind of like a single row Scorch that affects the opposing row of what you play him on. But that row has to have a lot of strength on it for this to work. So in this case, it doesn't actually do anything because none of the opponent's rows are big enough yet. So I'll play him there, and his Scorch effect doesn't work. But what you're trying to do with Geralt Igni is hold on to him till deep into rounds, and hopefully the unit, or the opponent I should say, gets a row that has at least 25 strength on it. Then you can throw Geralt Igni down, and he'll scorch the strongest unit on that opposing row. So Scorch effects are one of the more interesting things in Gwent. It's often a very high skill cap card because it's easy to jump the gun and settle for Scorches that are weaker than what you could get if you were more patient. And you definitely have to be careful about damaging units on your own side. And sometimes you can get in situations where you simply can't play a Scorch or Epidemic without killing your own units, because the opponent might just be playing a whole bunch of little units that are kind of in the middle in terms of strength, and then you're kind of out of luck with playing those cards. So they're kind of hit or miss, but when they work, they can work really well, and they can be really fun to play with. Alright, that's all I'm going to say about removal effects in this video. In the next video, there's going to be a little change of pace. I'm going to go into the different multiplayer game modes that are available in Gwent, and that will mostly conclude this level 1 of my guide, and I'll be getting to more detailed things about the game in level 2. Alright, see you then, guys.